I love talking with shop owners because it's always so cool to see what different shops are applying in their shops and to see what's actually working and not working. We can talk about it all we want, but what's actually working in a shop? On today's episode, we have Michael Bradshaw of K&M Collision, and he actually spoke at the Southeast Collision Conference and talked about a few different things, but a couple of things we're going to talk about today is one thing that really differentiates them is they actually understand the policy language for the insured. Pretty interesting, right? They also understand the appraisal clause and how to use it. So we're going to chat with him today on that and a couple of other things and how they're executing those things successfully in their shop. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Body Bangin', your podcast for all things body. Auto body, that is. And now, introducing Body Bangin's host, Mickey Woods of Mickey Woods Marketing. Mickey is a former auto collision center owner and is now a marketing and business development expert to shops across the globe.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Body Bangin' podcast. On today's podcast, we have my friend Michael Bradshaw. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. And he's actually coming to us from the Southeast Collision Conference. So, hi, Michael.
Hey, how are you?
You like Michael or Mike?
Either one's fine. I think the older I get, the more people call me Mike. So,
all right. Yeah, you're one of the good old boys now. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. My dad's name's Mike, so I like that. So anyway, Mike talked today in a session earlier to everybody. And how many people do you think were in your session today?
I don't know. Probably 50 or 60, I would say. It was pretty full.
There's a lot of sessions going on.
Yeah.
Vendor booths and everything. So there's a lot going on over there. But today you were talking, it seems like I have a kind of a little synopsis of what you're going to talk about. You talked a lot about the appraisal clause. So yeah. I think, okay.
Yeah, that's right. We really kind of hit on just policy language in general, better understanding, educating yourself on policy language, including the appraisal clause and some of the common rules and regulations that may transfer from state to state. I think the general message was just, as a collision repairer in today's world, you gotta educate and empower yourself with that kind of stuff, and really giving examples of how we put that to use in our company and how we've helped others kind of put it to use.
Yeah, and then to give a little background, which I should have mentioned earlier, Michael's the VP of K&M.
Yes, ma'am.
Collision Centers, Collision.
Just K&M Collision. Yeah.
Okay, so you just have the one location.
We do. Yeah.
Okay, and then you're also on the board for SCRS.
That's correct. I am the secretary, recently elected as a secretary for SCRS. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I assume based off of your Audi shirt that you probably have a lot of certifications at your location?
Yeah, I think we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of like 26 or 27 roughly at this point. I mean,
that's it.
Yeah, that's it. It's easier to tell which ones, that are in the industry that we don't have. But we went down the certification path really early on, kind of before it was the popular thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think our first certification was 2011, 2012.
Okay, cool.
Was with Volkswagen. And since then, I mean, it's across the board, Audi, Porsche,
Tesla.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've been Tesla in the past. Jaguar, Land Rover, Mercedes. I mean, go on, but we're Rivian, working
cool.
on our Lucid certification.
Nice.
So we work on a lot of aluminum intensive vehicles for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate you talking about the appraisal clause because not a lot of anybody really knows about it. It seems like recently we're getting I see a lot of social media posts surrounding it and the power of the appraisal clause and getting the customer, the consumer, the guest, whatever you want to call them, a fair value for their vehicle, which is really nice. But the one thing I think is so important is the shop has to be educated on it. Because how do we help educate our guests if we don't know really what it entails.
Yeah, and so we talked a lot about that in my class today. North Carolina is somewhat unique in that we have a standard form policy. So,
Mhm.
regardless of what carrier sells automobile insurance, the policy language reads the same.
Okay.
So that's nice because everything's consistent, and
Yeah.
from one carrier to the next, their obligations are all the same.
Hmm.
And so in North Carolina, we found we can use the appraisal clause to help with the ACV dispute if their vehicle's totaled and they disagree on the value, but
Mhm.
also on repair dispute issues.
Right.
So as a shop, if we or any other shop identifies a cost to repair and an insurance company comes in significantly less than that, that is an opportunity for the customer to invoke the appraisal clause.
Right.
And you kind of touched on it. It seems like there's a lot more awareness, in the industry now than there was even a couple of years ago. But
Mhm.
we've been doing this for, gosh, I want to say about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've really been kind of educating the customers on the appraisal clause, and kind of as part of that, I saw a need in the industry initially locally. There are not a ton of independent appraisers that work on behalf of the consumer,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And the few that there are out there are more equipped to handle ACV disputes and diminished value disputes, right?
Yes.
I think those are the situations that are commonly talked about. But they're just, quite frankly, there are not a lot of appraisers that are educated on the repair processes, have access to the correct information, and can represent the consumer's interest on a repair dispute, right? And
Right.
so that's something, multiple years ago, we kind of started an endeavor. It's a separate company. It's Collision Consumer Advocates.
Okay.
And we've got a group of licensed and certified appraisers that will actually help consumers, across the country through
Yeah.
that process. And, we took a small sample size today, the last 50 appraisal disputes that we personally handled,
Mhm.
resulted in an average payment increase of about $4,600.
Wow.
Just on repairable vehicles. So it really
Wow.
speaks to the gap between
Yeah.
a well-educated body shop and what they've identified for a correct repair process, and what
Mhm.
carriers are trying to pass off to the consumers
Seriously.
that's needed. Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned it a little bit that state to state it differs.
right.
So, does your organization, do they know the different state laws? Or are they mainly just in North Carolina?
Yeah. We work in virtually any state. I think the hard part becomes most states, the policy language varies from carrier to carrier. So we're actually seeing, some carriers, State Farm being, kind of the leader, they're writing the ability for a consumer to challenge a repair amount under the appraisal clause and limiting it just to the ACV if it's total.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so that was something we touched on too today in the class, just as as shops, educating the Department of Insurance in your state as to how impactful that is to a consumer when you take
Yeah,
away their ability to dispute what their carrier says.
absolutely.
So I'm a big believer in educating and empowering, and quite frankly, there's not enough shops out there that really do a good job of it, right? So we
Yeah.
really try to lift everybody up, and get everybody on the same page in that sense.
Yeah. And you mentioned one thing a little bit earlier about knowing certain terminology within the policy.
Right.
So your team at your shop, you're teaching them to understand the actual agreement then? Well, it's a little
Right.
easier for you because you guys only need to understand like one, because then it
One,
applies to
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But now what are those types of like nuances that you're trying to teach your people to
Well,
kind of look out for?
just understanding, you'll appreciate this term, being around the industry, prevailing rates are reasonable and customary. We
Mhm.
only owe what's reasonable and customary. We
Right.
only owe prevailing rates. Well, in North Carolina and in many policies, that language doesn't exist. Right.
Oh,
So it's just things like that. Understanding the obligations of maybe aftermarket parts, and
mhm.
what criteria they have to meet in order to
Right.
fulfill the obligation of like kind of quality under the policy.
Right.
those are a couple of things we touched on. Even duties after a loss. A couple of examples. Like a customer has a duty to allow the carrier to inspect or appraise the vehicle after they have a loss. They've got a duty to mitigate their damages. So if they've got glass that's busted out, covering the vehicle so there's not more damage to the interior. They just, all sorts of things like that. Just really understanding A, what the customer's obligation is, and B, what the carrier's obligation is. And, what we found is the majority of individuals, that are working at these insurance companies are not policy language experts. Many times they misquote what the policy says or will outright, state something that's not true or not contained within the policy. And so a big part of the class was, how can we educate ourselves on the policy language and then utilize that, in a negotiation, right? When we're having an issue with a carrier and they say something's not owed because of the policy or that they only owe X, Y, and Z, actually being able to call them out and say, well, no, your policy actually says otherwise. So,
Hey, would you like to increase the number of cars in your drive? Well, look no further. The Mickey Woods marketing team provides collision center specific marketing. We use proven techniques to not only increase your sales, but put money in your pocket. Visit us at collisioncentermarketing.com, or you can find my personal contact information in the show notes. And let's get your 2022 off to a body banging start. So what do you recommend then for shops that would like to know better? I mean, where would they begin with something like that? Because policies can often be so frustrating and confusing. I mean, I know I look at all the words. I'm like, that's a lot of words.
Yeah.
You just want to shut off. So where do you recommend somebody start with something like that?
I mean, I think, first and foremost, just figuring out what rules and regulations in your state apply to insurance claims and auto body repair, right? So just make yourself aware of what the rules and regulations are.
Yeah.
And then, in states where maybe there's vastly different policy language from carrier to carrier, try to get a couple sample policies and read them and try to understand what the difference is here or there. And, there's certain things will probably come up in that where, a body shop may want to seek the advice of counsel, right? Yeah. To see how that is interpreted or how that is actually applied.
Right.
In an individual case. So I think, those first thing is reading it, because far too many shops in our industry have never read an insurance policy.
Yeah.
And so if we're supposed to be the experts on how this works, and walk our customers through the process, because they need that direction.
Right.
They're certainly not experts. And the majority of them have certainly not read a policy. Yeah. So I think just trying to consume as much information as possible on the front end is really kind of how I got started and what I would recommend and kind of what we've walked others down the road.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, another great thing is to get involved in your associations, because then you can, if you're unfamiliar, oftentimes there are other shops or other people within your space that know those things that you can learn from.
Right. And that's, just like this event that the CCA is putting on, it's a great event because there are certain classes here that are touching on a variety of topics. And then there's the networking opportunities, right? To speak to fellow shop owners or managers or estimators about situations that they've encountered and how have you handled them, and, kind of bouncing ideas off of one another. And, I think that's something that we need to do a better job of as an industry. And that was kind of a point we hit on earlier, is there are a lot of shops here. It's a great turnout. But for every shop that's here, there's 4 or 5 shops in their local market that aren't here, right?
Yeah.
And it's about bringing others along and raising everybody's level in the industry. I think that's one of the things they can do, is not only join the association, but encourage others in their markets to join the association so they can educate and empower themselves as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's surprising to me how many people don't go to the conferences and the symposiums and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm a former shop owner and I went to literally everything that I could go to. And every time I learned something different, even if it wasn't in like the presentation, which usually it was, but it's talking to talking to your peers, talking to vendors, just there's so much to learn and we're always learning. Things are constantly changing. So at your shop, just to kind of give people an idea, like how, like square footage wise, do you have like a really large facility? Do you have a lot of people? Because I think there's some people that hear this kind of thing and think, oh, well, that works for him, but that could never work for us. Right. So can you give us an idea?
Yeah. So, when we went down this road with, it's kind of all at the same time, the manufacturer certifications and, gaining understanding of policy language and appraisal clause and everything. We were a really small shop. We had 3 to 4 people working total at that point. I think we were, at that time, our shop was less than 5,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, today we're 34,000 square feet.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. I have, I think, 35 people or so working at the shop. And the thing I tell people is we've not done anything that anyone else could do, right? There's nothing inherently special about what we've done. Right. It's just we've worked really hard at it. And, that's what I try to encourage everybody. You got to start somewhere. Yeah. And, it's a lot easier now than it was 10 years ago. Yeah. Right? When we went down the road, there was a lot of contentious discussions between carriers and, a lot of situations that were pretty stressful. But I think if you believe in what you're doing, say what you do what you say, if you have to be about it, I think what we found is eventually, many of the carriers we deal with respect the way we do things and the processes we do and understand that when we bill for something, we're going to do it. And I think far too often what happens is people will go to a class and they'll see that there are things they can charge for, but they don't put processes in place to make sure that those operations are actually getting performed. Right. And I'm a big believer in, if you're going to go down this road, you absolutely got to make sure that, everybody at your facility is all in, because when you're billing for things that you're not doing, you've lost your integrity. Right.
Totally.
And then the carrier is never going to want to pay for those things or any others at that point.
I agree with you. I think a lot of shops fall into the trap of, it's almost like a legal battle where you come in way too high, they come in way too low, and then you find somewhere in the middle that you're willing to just negotiate on, where, like you're saying, no, you just put everything in there that you're actually going to do. And this is the number. It's not like there's wiggle room. It just is what it is, kind of thing. Right. I would hope, but I see a lot of shops still playing the other game, because kind of like, this is the game, we got to play it. And I understand why they do, but I can also see your point as then, those adjusters and those insurance companies that get to know you, they now know this isn't a back and forth kind of thing. This is what they said they're going to do. This is what they're going to do. And then if they know that you're willing to invoke the appraisal clause, then they're probably like, let's just deal with it now, so we don't have to go down that path.
And that's what you touched on is, you got some shops that are, they start way up here and then they come down, and it's, it just not holding steadfast, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've identified something and you believe that's what it needs, hold that, right?
Totally.
And the more you hold to it, the easier it's going to be, eventually to not have to fight the battle. Because if every time you try to implement something or you try to hold to something and they know you come off of it, right? That's what the expectation is, right?
Yeah.
It's really all about setting expectations.
Totally.
In any relationship, it's about setting expectations and what the mutual respect for one another is, and what each person's job in that situation is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. I feel like that could be a big change in the industry if we could get away from that, because it's almost like they know that it's the game, but then it sucks for shops like you who are not trying to play the game, but they're used to the people playing. So they think that you're just part of the game when you're just trying to do your job. Imagine that.
Just trying to repair the vehicle the right way,
Yes, totally. Well, I appreciate all the information. I think it's super helpful. It's very relevant in where we're at today. Like you talked about the disparity between what the insurance company is wanting to pay versus what they actually should be paying. I
Yeah.
can say that. I don't know if you can, but so yeah, I think it's great. I'll link all your information if you want to your other company down in the description, if you just want to shoot that over to me. So if somebody
Certainly.
needs an independent adjuster, isn't that what they're called? Independent adjuster?
Yeah.
Independent
Adjuster,
appraiser?
appraiser.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you don't have somebody, then at least there's an option for you. I think
Yeah.
that'd be great. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to touch on? I know you've been probably talking all day, or now you got to talk to me.
Well, I mean, just want shops to know that, it really starts with educating themselves. I mean, as an industry, I think we've done a pretty poor job of educating ourselves, and it's a big ask in today's world, but shops have to understand there's so much information that they need to consume and be able to recall with some type of frequency.
Yeah.
And I think what I've seen, just looking at P pages, for example, right? I've taught so many estimating classes where I start the class out and I hold up the P pages and I ask, has anybody ever read this front to back? And less than 10% of the room throw their hands up, and it's kind of, it's kind of frustrating because that's your job, and this is one piece of information that's, I don't know, 35 or 40 pages,
right?
Relatively easy to comprehend if you just read it a couple times, and it's so I just think we do a poor job of working on improving ourselves, right? How do we make ourselves better? And it's no different than, an athlete or a sports team or, something like that. They believe they've got to improve every day, and they've got to practice and they've got to learn. And I think as an industry, we need to adopt that same mentality. And I think we would be in a much better place if we did.
I agree with you, which is part of the reason why we have this lovely podcast. Trying to educate and get information out there for people. So yeah, let's end on that note, because that's perfect. It's exactly, I think, the message that every speaker that I've spoken to today has kind of come with, of education, staying on top of things. The better we can be, the better partner we are, the better, the better we can be for everybody. Everybody benefits, right? So yeah, I totally appreciate that. So thank you for taking your time and chatting with me. Now you got the rest of the day off, I guess.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to enjoy it too. So I don't have any other classes until tomorrow. So we're gonna
there you go.
The day here. Yeah.
Good for you. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening to today's episode of Body Bangin', and we will see you next time. Bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We have some incredible topics and guests coming your way you will not want to miss. If you are watching on YouTube and don't want to miss the latest and greatest, you'll want to hit the bell after subscribing, so you will get a pop-up each time a video podcast goes live. To our devoted fans, would you mind paying it forward and sharing this little gem with someone else you think may benefit from it? Much love from all of us here at Body Bangin', all things auto body.